breaking news. There's been a report that the 49ers are calling and asking around, trying to trade up into the teens. So this is much higher than even you and I have kind of talked about if they wanted to combine their first and second round pick to get to the, somewhere in the 20s to get a guy like Mims or to get a tackle. Now, do you think, one, if they did that they would go after, because it's been rumored that they would go get the tight end that's been compared to George Kittle, or if they get up into the teens, when I first heard that, why would they not go get one of those immediate starter top 5 tackles?
Because
2 questions. Do you think that they also like, in order to do that, wouldn't they have to trade Ayuk probably? Like, how would they get up to the
maybe they could do it. It depends on what the team's willing to do. Is that you can trade the first and second round pick, and that can get you into the teens. First and second, just say, here you go. But it depends on the team saying, okay, is that a value to us or not? Maybe. But by the trade chart, the traditional trade chart of when you trade pick X and Y,
especially in this draft, it feels more top heavy in that. I think even in your article, you kind of talked about the first round is like 1 through 20. And then once you get past 20, it's kind of like second round picks in that first round.
Right.
So it does
and there's a ton of them. Yeah. So if you group them, it would be right. Sorry to talk over.
Give that up. No worries.
Yeah. So the first half of the first round is where the actual first round players are in terms of how teams evaluate them and say that this guy's first round, absolutely blue chip, best player. Historically, he would be a first rounder. These guys are great. Then it starts to fade. By the time you get into the mid-20s, you are now in second round talent. And with this draft, there's a ton of second round rated players. And that's why you would trade down, is that from 25 to 50, it's who do you like? But basically, those 25 players are rated very similarly in terms of how you would grade that player out. And that's why you would trade back, is that I don't need to take this guy at 31 when I can get the player I want that I value at the same level in the 40s.
Now, the argument is if you get him in the first round, you have that extra year, right? Depending on what kind of...
And that makes a lot of difference, especially at quarterback. And that's why teams might trade into the late first round for a QB. For the Niners, it's something they have to consider too.
Right?
Yeah, and Bo Nix. But so we'll see how that plays out. But for the Niners, it's basically if you trade up, you're getting a real first rounder. Now, would they trade up for Brock Bowers? I think they would, because we have to approach this the way Kyle would.
Can you tell people about Brock Bowers who maybe haven't heard of him?
He's a tight end that does a lot of different things. He's a Swiss Army knife for Georgia. He carries the ball. He can get plays where he's set up as a wide receiver, as a tight end. He's got natural ball skills, and he's a good, not great blocker. But most of the comparisons that are drawn on him say that he's George Kittle. And so if we look at this draft the way Kyle would, he'd say, okay, offense
Kittle
first.
Is a great blocker.
Yeah. But he became one. Kittle developed that. And Bowers is the same way, where he's at a good level as a blocker, but he's not elite yet. But he's got the skills to do it. And so the key with Bowers is he can do everything. It's kind of like Kyle is going to be attracted to having a weapon that can be a chess piece that he can use in so many different ways. That's something that's really going to appeal to him.
That just scared me. That the way that you describe that, for some reason in my mind, was like Jalen Hurd, and I got scared.
He's a little more.
Not trying to put that on him.
He's more stable physically than Jalen Hurd, but that's the thinking, is that if you're Kyle Shanahan, you're always going to think offense first, weapon first. And so what's the weapon that the Niners need most? Tight end 2. They've tried to use 2 draft picks last year to get a tight end. Didn't work. They whiffed on both.
Even this offseason.
Yeah, and then this offseason, Brock Wright, and they don't get him. They got the guy from Denver, but he's basically a blocker. So if you went to Kyle Shanahan and said, what's the one piece you need? He'd say tight end 2. And that's why he would trade up and go after Brock Bowers, because then they could have a 2 tight end set in the offense, and they could be more versatile. And as Bowers' blocking improves, then he can become more of an asset that way. And as George Kittle begins to decline, then
Yeah.
Bowers can take over. So
That
that's
was
the thinking. But
yeah.
fans, I
Using
think,
our
would
own
still be
logic,
disappointed, though. Because
using our
fans would
own
say, oh,
logic,
boy,
we
we're moving up to 15. We're going to get a tackle. And then the San Francisco 49ers select Brock
yeah.
Bowers, tight end Georgia. But I think that's possible. I really do. Because if you
I
look at it the way
wonder.
Kyle would, he'd say, I want
Yeah.
Bowers.
And I wonder if that's actually not bad. Like using our logic. I mean, I think it would be bad because I think you need to take advantage of the tackle class that they have.
I agree.
However, like just grading Brock Bowers as a whole, I think like and the 49ers targeting a guy like him, if they are looking to extend Brock Purdy, having more weapons that can really maximize that middle of the field, that can also eventually help with blocking, and then using the same logic that you and I were just doing with Mims, eventually being able to take over for Trent Williams. Now, I'm not, trying to write George Kittle off the team, but I think you're right. Like how lethal would George Kittle and Brock Bowers be on the team for as long as that was possible. And then when George Kittle does get healthy, you actually have a serviceable tight end to take over for him because the 49ers have not had that, for if George Kittle misses games or even when he gets older. So really having a guy
Right.
that could potentially
Right.
take over long term would be
Would be huge.
potentially a really great asset, especially if they do look at Brock Purdy as that franchise guy. And you and I have also talked about, the importance of extending Brandon Ayuk and kind of getting a core that's going to grow together. So maybe
Yeah.
in that way, I would reflect positively on that sort of
Yeah.
trade
Yeah.
up to get Brock Bowers. But I would definitely be um, like locked in to see who they were getting next. Because
Yeah. No
obviously
question.
we've
Yeah.
seen, in the most critical moments, it doesn't matter how good your weapons are if your offensive line breaks down. So it's kind
Correct.
of like a push
Correct.
and pull there where
Yeah.
I, in some aspects, can understand the logic and even appreciate it. But then in other ones, the more, traumatized fan in me is like, can you just fix this one area first, please? So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and fans are rightly focused on the line of saying that, can you please finally address this? Because especially after last year where they didn't even pick an offensive lineman, everybody's on pins and needles saying, please get an offensive lineman. And so if they trade up to the mid first and then they take Bowers, I think that fans will be shocked, disappointed for like 5-10 minutes. Then they'll hear analysis on it and
get
then they'll
around
buy
it.
into it right away. It's Bowers makes sense because he could start as if they want to open with a two tight end set. He'd be a weapon for them. He'd be somebody that would work really well going forward long term with Purdy. So it checks all the boxes to do that. It's just that, okay, but you still need a
So
tackle, a guard, and a center.
Is he a little bit more of a sure player than some of these offensive linemen that we
Yeah,
are projecting more off traits?
yeah, yeah.
That part would be good.
Bowers is more solid. That he has far less risk than Mims, for example.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that
Knock on
Mims won't
wood.
end up being a better
49ers
player, but
Brock
it's
Bowers
just
they're gonna draft him. He's never gonna play. Mims is gonna go be an all-star on a different team. That's what's
well, we don't
we
know that, but
predicted here.
I think that Bowers would really he would be optimized with Shanahan as his coach in that system. He'd be able to use Bowers well, and so that would be the
Now,
appeal. Is that when I heard mid-teens, that's when I thought, okay, he wants Bowers because that's where Bowers is possibly going to go. He might go 10. There's a lot of people saying he's going to go to the Jets. And if he does, then if the Niners still go up to the mid first, now they're looking at tackle.
the Jets gonna be good this year, you think? It's
If
just
Aaron
all hands
Rodgers
on
can
his
stay
body.
healthy, yeah. But
Interesting. I
everything
feel like
depends on
even
him.
if he's healthy, he's like old now. But I don't
Yeah,
know. Maybe it's
yeah.
just like scarred in my mind his, last season. I just feel like Robert Saleh might be on his way back soon to the 49ers,
Could
depending on how
could
that
be.
goes. But it does feel like they are building. I mean, they have a good defense, and when you just talked about adding Brock Powers, they already have obviously a great wide receiver over there. But you got to get the quarterback position right. This
Yep.
isn't a Jets show. I just trailed off thinking about how the 49ers might get a new defensive coordinator next year. Because I
They
don't know,
could.
they let one go after he was third in the NFL. So pressure is on the mixture of Brandon Staley and Nick Sorensen this year.
Yeah.
um, But really quickly, back to trading up into the teens, what do you assume that it would take to get up there? Because I suggested that I think that one of the only ways I can see that happening is if they did move on from Brandon Ayuk, which then I can definitely see, like earlier I was saying, oh, we could see fans getting around it if they do end up going tight end. If they get rid of Ayuk to do it, I think it's the wrong move. I think
Me
if
too.
they're redoing their core, keeping Brandon Ayuk, keeping Brock Purdy, then getting a guy like Brock Powers, I'm in support of that. If you have to get rid of Brandon Ayuk to do it, I do not agree with that. So, what are some
Neither. I
ways that
agree.
they
I agree
could
with you
trade up?
completely that they need to keep Ayuk as part of a future core. That needs
Yeah.
to be the evolution of the offense moving in that direction. It's easier to make a trade with Ayuk, because teams will want him because he's that good. But they can make trades with picks alone to get up that high. Yeah. A first and a second will get you to about the middle of the draft. So they could do that just with picks. They don't have to use Ayuk. It's just easier. If you said, "Here's our first round pick and Brandon Ayuk," people would be interested in that. Or here's our second rounder in Ayuk or something like that. But they can make the trade and keep Ayuk. They can do both.
Okay. Well, that's promising because for some reason I was thinking even if they combined their first and second round pick, that the highest they could get up to would be like 24 or something. So it's
Let
makes
me
me
look it
feel
up.
more positively.
Yeah.
Do you have like a
I've
trade
got the
value chart?
trade value chart, the historic chart. So if the Niners combined the first and the second, that would be 876 points, which would take them to the Rams at 19. Not that they would trade with the Rams, but it gives you an idea of where they could go in the draft. And then they could add
Okay.
more if they need to. Because they've
I'm
got
right.
3/4, they've got 2/6. There's other things they could add to keep going higher up.
Now, I've made it clear I'm team trade up because I just think that being aggressive in this draft where it does feel like the quality is so much better just a little bit earlier on. I appreciate thinking that the team knows what they're doing and then being confident enough to go get a guy. Um, but a guy that has been both mocked to go to the 49ers with their second round pick, but then also with their first round pick, depending on who you ask. So huge disparity there is Roger Rose